Carbon Exchange, BCX in short, playing a key role in shaping the future of voluntary carbon market and renewable energy certificates. So please join me to welcome Rizal. All right, next we have our second panelist, Eddy, who is the Corporate Strategy Manager and Head of Solarvest Borneo, Sarawak. So Eddy is supporting diversifying Solarvest business from pure play solar to clean energy solutions, including energy storage, EV charging, energy efficiency, and hydrogen. So he also supports market expansion and operational strategy in Borneo, with focus in Sarawak. He serves as a project manager to implement Solarvest's first clean energy project and set up the company's first innovation lab for solar, EV storage, hydrogen, and lead the establishment of Solarvest Borneo. In addition, Eddy founded the new EV business unit named Power B and developed its business plan. He's actively involved in developing new business ideas such as renewable energy certificates, similar to Rizal, carbon credits project, and business exploration like, again, interestingly, urban farming, something that Rizal and Eddy have in common. So please join me to welcome Eddy. All right. So before we start actually talking about renewable energy and setting the scene, so there's a quick poll. So we just want to know what comes to your mind when we talk about renewable energy. So you can scan the QR code so we can know kind of like to gauge the sentiment around renewable energy at the moment. Understand there's a lot of political change, switching of leaders. So it might influence your views on renewable energy. So feel free to scan the QR code so the answer will actually appear on the screen. So for those who just joined in, again, welcome to our panel session on renewable energy and energy efficiency. So very happy to have you here as we dive into the topic, discuss about future of energy and how you can get involved to reduce your own carbon emissions through embracing renewable energy. So if you remember during our last session on January 18, actually before Chinese New Year, we discussed about the magic number 1.5 degrees Celsius and how climate change actually impact people disproportionately. Today, we continue the conversation on focusing on solar, renewable energy in general, specifically on solar, and also the opportunities present for youth or for household. Okay, we can see a lot of answers coming in. Very exciting. Fossil fuels, steep learning curve. Okay. Abundant. Okay, there's one on not sure if nuclear can be considered. Okay. Biomass or fossil fuels. Okay, that's interesting. That's entirely the opposite of renewable energy, which is interesting. From renewable, no, okay. Okay, so if you have any thoughts, feel free to pop it in the Slido. That's great. Wind, solar power, geothermal. All right, just to set as we have more answers coming, we'll just keep the slide sharing on. So as we all know, to meet the rising energy demand, so we actually have two parts. One is continue to use our fossil fuel, like what mentioned by one of the audience here about fossil fuel, or we can explore renewable sources like solar to reduce our carbon emissions. So our country has actually set ambitious near-term target to boost the renewable energy capacity to meet the growing demand. As population growth, the energy demand will grow as well. So this commitment is also part of our national broader strategy to develop a low emission, a more sustainable energy system. All right, ways to energy. Yeah, that's also a good one. So I think there's also some initiative exploring that. Okay, so I think we can stop the slider. Thank you so much for your thoughts on renewable energy. So Malaysia is well positioned to build a sustainable energy system, as mentioned, with a higher share of renewable energy. So the transition can support socio-economic development, address climate change, and enhance our national energy security. So renewable energy is a term that we hear so often these days. And for most of people, it might feel still like a buzzword. There's a lot of different understanding about renewable energy. How would you describe renewable energy in the simplest way?
Okay, thanks very much, Shao, for the question. And I think it's interesting to start off with the poll to see the different perspectives from the audience today who have, spent your Saturday to be with us today, which is very interesting. Okay, so I guess this is something that I garnered from my own experience and learning. So it may differ from, person to person. So let's get to the basics. So what is renewable energy? So from my understanding, renewable energy is basically how do we define or look at renewable energy is we have to look at the fuel source. So when we look at the fuel source, what type of fuel source that it utilizes. So basically, renewable energy are mainly those energies, those types of energy that's fueled by natural sources and that they replenish over a relatively short period of time. So if you look at some of the answers just now, some people mentioned fossil fuels. So technically, it does replenish, but it takes millions of years. The so-called dinosaur fuel, right? So fossil fuels, mainly coal and gas, and also oil, are not considered renewable energy. And there's also another interesting point about nuclear, whether it's renewable energy or not. So from my understanding, some of these types of energies, such as nuclear and even the uh, recently talked about green hydrogen, um, they can be considered low carbon fuels because, for example, nuclear, they actually come from a finite resource. For example, uranium. So you need to mine for it, and there's also waste that you need to find a place to store, which is a whole different topic altogether. So yeah, so technically they don't come under the term renewable energy. So when I was studying renewable energy earlier, I stumbled across actually one interesting point in Philippines Department of Energy, actually, because I guess Philippines was one of the earlier adopters of renewable energy in the region, in ASEAN region. So what's interesting to me is for Philippines, they have defined renewable energy as six types of fuels, and they've used an acronym called Big Show. Okay, BIGSHOW. Not sure if anyone have heard about this. So Big Show stands for BI, bioenergy. G is geothermal. S, solar. H, hydro. O, ocean. And W, wind. So I think for me, at least, that's something easy to remember. These are the major types of renewables available. So Big Show, bioenergy, geothermal, solar, hydro, ocean, and wind. So of course, that's just the basics. But when you go in a bit deeper, bioenergy can be either biomass from, for example, palm oil waste, like EFBs and so on, or it can even be from biogas, or even someone mentioned waste to energy or municipal waste. Geothermal is something very interesting. It can provide long-term baseload power, but only certain areas, mainly areas which has a lot of volcanic activity, such as Indonesia, which has, I guess, quite significant amount of potential, close to 30,000 megawatt. Solar, everyone knows solar. It is something prominent here when we talk about renewable energy in Malaysia. Solar is definitely what we think of, and it's typically the photovoltaic type of solar, which converts energy from sunlight to electricity. There's also the lesser known concentrated solar panel, or CSP, which is mainly in the desert areas, high heat areas such as Middle East and so on. It's basically using heat captured by various basically mirrors and pointed to one heat source to power that, for example, molten salt to create heat. So it's a different type of solar energy. And hydro is something I guess we're also familiar. Sarawak Energy has it, TNB has it, and it come in either large scale dam type hydro or the smaller run of river, which doesn't require a dam and just follows the flow of the river. The lesser popular one or lesser available technology is ocean, which can either take energy from mechanical movement or the temperature differential in the ocean. So this is a bit technically and even commercially challenging to develop. So we don't see much of this. And also, lastly, wind, which can either be onshore or on the land, or it can even be offshore, which can actually take up a bigger amount of power. So yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell for renewable energy. Hope that
Right.
clarifies. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for giving a comprehensive view on renewable energy and particularly the one in Southeast Asia. All right, moving on. So understand both of you actually have more than 5 or even 10 years experience in your respective field of renewable energy. Sustainability and renewable energy requires a lot of passion and, in fact, long-term commitment. So what initially sparked your interest in these areas? And what was your initial step in turning that passion into a career? Maybe first one, I will point the questions to pose a question to Eddy.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So actually, I've been working for almost 10 years now. So I started work in 2015. Actually, I was in renewable for 4 years. So my first 6 years is actually not in renewable energy. I actually was selling chemicals, industrial chemicals. So that time, back then, in my first 6 years, I was more involved in industrial chemicals. So I was never exposed to sustainability. I was never exposed to climate change. So actually, in our career, I always told many people that you will never know what you get until you try. So actually, one day, I think back after COVID, one of my friend in Sarawak Energy wanted to hire me in, and I actually didn't join Sarawak Energy back then. But soon after that, a year after, I got the chance. This friend recommend me to Solarvest, which is my current company. So he asked me whether you are interested to join this dynamic very fast-paced industry, and also the first solar company to be listed in Malaysia. So back then, I didn't know anything about solar. It was right after COVID, so I took the challenge. I wanted to venture into it. So I started to get into this industry 4 years ago, and I would say it's actually the one of my best decision in my career, because this industry since then has been growing. Actually, not just starting after COVID, since 2012, since we have the first policy, solar policy or renewable energy policy in Malaysia, we call it FIT, Fit-in Tariff. The industry has been booming quite a lot in the last 12 to 13 years, almost like a 30 to 50% CAGR growth year on year. And if you look at the global trend right now, I would say renewable energy or green energy is actually in the top three, together with digital, AI trends, etc. So it's actually a very interesting industry, very fast paced, huge growth potential, because our whole global is going for net zero by 2050. So I would say that it's a very good industry to be in. And for us to turn the passion into a successful career, in my opinion, is we have to know how we contribute to this industry, because all of us are different. Some are engineers, some are finance, some are in legal, some are in business. All of you can contribute to the renewable energy industry. So I think first of all, the industry itself, you need to have the passion. Second thing is the work that you do, the function that you do, you need to have that passion as well. So if you are very passionate as an engineer, you can join, you can do projects, solar projects, wind projects, biogas projects. If you're interested in business, then you can look into how to collaborate with different players, how to collaborate with different um, investors to push the solar projects in Malaysia. So there are many ways that you can contribute, but most importantly is to know yourself and know what you want to contribute to the industry. And I think with these few elements in your planning, I'm sure that your career in renewable will turn out to be more or less successful.
Right. Thanks, Eddy, for sharing that. Yeah, so I understand it's really not a straight line path to your current career, and you built from zero understanding to now heading a department in a solar company. That's really impressive. So yeah, that's also highlighting the importance of passion and collaboration. Back to you, Rizal. What's your thoughts around this?
Yeah, thanks, Xiao. Yeah, I think it's similar to Eddy. I think most of us in the industry today didn't start immediately from renewables. So for myself, I was already in the power sector during the early part of my career when I was in Malakoff at that time. I'm not sure if it's still now, the largest IPP in Malaysia. So at that point in time, we were just mainly focusing on gas power plants and also coal power plants. These are the two projects which we focused on mainly. And although renewable energy did come in during those times as well. So I started in Malacca about 2009. So 2010 onwards, there was some interest, I guess, even globally on renewables, wind and solar. But at that point, the price point was just too expensive, and the technology is also not as mature as today. So there was a bit of interest. It was intriguing to see all this renewable, but it didn't really catch on because everyone's looking at fossil fuels, uh, mainly coal and gas. And then eventually, towards the end of my tenure in Malakoff, I actually stumbled upon a course called permaculture. And this is, if you're not familiar, it's actually a systems thinking kind of design principle, I would call it, which is inspired by nature. That's a long story, but basically, I was so inspired by this, I decided to leave my corporate career and move to a 1 acre land in Sungai Buloh to develop this, permaculture so-called farm for about 2 to 3 years, and then for due to some personal reasons, eventually had to leave that and join back the corporate side, and ventured into for a start district cooling, which is something related to energy efficiency, and then eventually solar, and now sustainability. So I would say that that is my own personal decarbonization journey from fossil fuels to renewables to sustainability. So, and I guess the interest comes from that. Uh, I guess everyone knows about the targets like Eddy mentioned, net zero 2050, and Shawi mentioned earlier, keeping the global temperature to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's something that I strongly advocate for, I strongly believe in. And I guess there's many different ways to do that, whether it's on the ground, whether it's in corporate, whether it's in NGOs, think tanks such as Fasin Kita and so on. So everyone needs a part to play, and I think that's what's interesting about this career. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Rizal. It's an inspiring journey, starting from gas and coal and then moving on to renewable energy. And part of the journey, you also pursue your passion in permaculture. And in fact, just for your information, we also have some videos and reels around permaculture. So it's a small farm.
Uh,
I think it's near the KL region. Can't remember where exactly. So it's a very interesting way for you to grow your own crops. If you have a piece of land, so feel free to check that out. Thanks so much. That's very inspiring. So moving on, we're gonna go move on to talk about a bit more on the challenge side. So based on your experience in solar and renewable energy sector, so what do you see as the biggest challenge in Malaysia faces in adopting renewable energy on a larger scale? And on the flip side, what do you see as opportunities? Maybe first I will pose this question to Rizal.
all right, sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I think if we look back a bit on the history in Malaysia in particular, we look back at around 1981. That's when we actually come up with the government actually come up with the four fuel policy. At that point, because we had been too reliant on oil, so four fuel is supposed to help reduce the dependency on oil when we introduce coal, for example. But then along the way, we do as the awareness comes, we realize that coal is also another polluting fuel. So that's where in 2001, the government also introduced what's called the fifth fuel policy, which adds renewable energy to the mix. So of course, it was still early days, and it took a bit of time to develop into what it is today, which is like easily 24 years from that point. Although today we can see that around 80+% of generation, at least in the peninsula of Malaysia, is still mainly reliant on coal and gas, despite the amount of initiatives by the government, by the authorities, to develop more renewable energy. So I guess there's a lot of different challenges actually in adopting renewable energy. But from my angle, I can see one of the bottlenecks, or one of the hindrances is actually in terms of the policies. So if you look at policies in other countries, they are a bit more aggressive, whereas in Malaysia, our policies are a bit more conservative. So in that sense, it actually doesn't help to unlock a lot of the potential available. But that being said, we have seen actually a lot of things being developed. I think in terms of large-scale solar development, it's now in the fifth or sixth iteration, depending on how we count it. It's actually the latest large-scale utility plan is under LSS 5 plus, and the government also announced that I think it was just yesterday that they are coming up with a plan for household rooftops to actually basically lease out your roofs and to be utilized by an off-taker or a user that can actually use this solar energy from your roofs. So that's something very interesting, and that can actually unlock a lot more potential for creation of solar energy. And I guess back in, I can't remember exactly when, but there was also a pilot study by the Sustainable Energy Development Authority, SEDA, in doing what's called a pilot P2P energy trading. So it's basically to simplify it, it's basically trading of the solar energy between the different solar rooftop owners. So, for example, if I'm not using it now, I can actually sell it to Shao, for example, because you need the energy, and you can, when you're not using it, you can sell it to Eddy and so on. Generally, that's how it works. And I think in certain other more advanced countries, they have already done this kind of policies and this kind of technologies. Um, and we see that there's a lot of opportunities here. Number one, because of the declining technology prices. So solar pricing from 10, 20 years ago to today is like it has gone down drastically. I think Eddy knows a bit more on that. Even battery storage prices have dropped quite significantly for the last few years. So there's also a myriad of other technology options when we look at green hydrogen, carbon capture. So there's a lot of exciting new technologies that needs to be developed hand in hand together with solar and batteries, for example. So each technology has its own challenge, its own um, advantage. So it actually depends on the application, it depends on the location, price, technical viability, and so on. So I mean, just to look at a good example, like in Sarawak, whereas I guess Eddy knows this very well, that the main fuel there is actually hydropower. 60 to 70%, if I'm not mistaken, it comes from hydropower compared to us, which still has to rely on fossil fuels. So that's where the example comes. So we have to see where it fits, where the technology fits, and in what application. Thanks.
Right, thanks, Rizal. Looks like it's really a multifaceted challenge, and we do see, some positivity. Like you say, the policy is changing and the prices are dropping with the adoption and also economy of scale. All right, turning back to you, Eddy. So as we all know, there's this National Energy Transition Roadmap, which is rolled out a couple of years ago. So how have you seen the solar energy adoption evolve in the residential sector? So what changes stood out the most to you?
All right. Actually, since the NETR, I would say 1.5 year ago, or I think maybe 2 years ago, actually the residential solar in Malaysia has been again booming more than ever. I think the last 12 months, I would say the NEM Rakyat. NEM Rakyat is actually a quota which is introduced by the government for residential 12 kilowatt and below. So I would say in the last 12 months, the residential solar market, as per my market research, it has been increasing almost like 100% year on year. Why? Because I would say first is the awareness has gone up ever since the government has made renewable energy as part of the economy drivers for the next 10 to 20 years. A lot of people are really asking about like, should I put solar on my rooftop? How can I be part of the net zero target of the Malaysia? Everyone seems like want to play a role in that direction. All fellow Malaysians, I see the awareness really coming out, even from the students, from the young generations. A lot of people, when I asked them 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, when I started this industry, I asked them, do you want to put solar on your rooftop? Back then, right? If you ask them that question, maybe less than half of them would understand your question, or maybe less than 10% would want to put on the solar. But today, if you go and ask this question around, almost half of them know exactly what is solar, how it works, and they even want to go and know whether it's worth to do it or not. So that kind of mentality and awareness shift is increasing month after month, year after year. And I would say what is the bottleneck for residential solar in the last 5 years is always been the upfront price, meaning to say what is the cost that the home buyer have to pay to put on the solar on the rooftop. In general, they have to pay 30 to 50K. In general, it depends on your roof, etc. If you ask the Malaysian, 30 to 50K, especially the M40, or we call it the M50 now, right? Do they want to pay the 30K to 50K upfront to put on the solar systems? Sometimes some people will hesitate because we want to keep that money for properties, for cars. So I think in that regard, right? So I would say the economics are very important. So nowadays, people need to see the value for money. If I put in 30K now, what kind of return I get back? So in the last 12 months, because of the higher electricity tariff increase, a lot of, for example, SST has increased to 8% for people who consume 800 kilowatt and above. Furthermore, people have to pay SST now for your house electricity bill if you consume more than 1,500 kilowatt hour a month. So all this make the home buyer more curious or more push them to put on the solar. And 1 year ago, April last year, government launched the Solarvest, which is a rebate to the home buyers who put on solar, 1,000 ringgit per kilowatt. So a lot of people get 4,000 because most of the roof in Semenanjung here, you can put more than 4 kilowatt. So people get 4,000 rebate. So that really changed the economics from a 6 years payback. Now they can get less than 5 years. So that makes them want to go for solar. And the adoption of solar is getting easier and easier. Nowadays, when you ask people which solar company I should go with, you can find it very easily compared to a few years ago. So I would say that the residential solar is really doing good in Malaysia, and it will continue to grow very well in the next few years.
Right, great insights, Eddie. Understand the electricity price increase, making it more viable, feasible, and there's a lot of rebates going on. So we understand, there's a more traditional scheme called net energy metering, which is a initiative of the government encourage households to not only generate their own electricity, but also send excess power back to the national grid to reduce their electricity bills in the process. So can you just explain to us how does this NEM, net energy metering, works?
Okay, so net energy metering is okay in short for NEM, meaning to say whatever solar energy that you generate on your roof, you need to consume the energy first. Meaning to say your load at home, right? You need to consume the energy first. Only when there's an excess of solar, then you export back to the grid. So this creates a good economics for those who are interested to put on solar on your rooftop. Why? Because the sunlight hours normally is from 7 a.m. in the morning started, then it follows a peak. Noontime, the solar is actually the irradiation is the highest. After that, it goes down until 5, 6 p.m. Towards night. So there's no more solar. So for home buyers, I would say, for home owners, right? Most of you might go out during daytime. You go to school. For the students, you go to school, you go out. Some goes to work. So during daytime, you might not be at home. So the load consumption is not high in your house. So when you have solar and it doesn't have the load, right? Then where the solar goes, it has to go to the grid. So NEM allows you, meaning to say the TNB will actually take the solar from your rooftop if your house is not consuming that solar energy. And some more they pay you one-on-one, meaning to say, let's say you take 1 kilowatt hour from TNB, 50 cents. Now you send it back to the grid because you are not using it. You sell them at 50 cents and they accept it. So I think that is a very good policy. A lot of countries started with NEM first. Then after that, they started to remove the NEM. Why? Because when they do NEM, right, the TNB has to incentivize you all. And how they get the money? Actually, they actually collect from the fund, which is actually part of your TNB bill. We call the KWTB fund, 1.5%. So that fund actually is collected by the government and the government used that to push for the NEM, allows them to buy back the electricity from you. So I think in short, to do that, to do NEM, right? Basically, TNB will just change the meter, your current meter. Your current meter is actually, we call it the TNB meter. It's actually one directional. So if you really put on solar, TNB have to come to your house and they have to change the meter to a bidirectional one. Why bidirectional? Because instead of taking energy from the grid, now you are actually sending it back to the grid two ways. So the meter is actually has to be changed. We call it the bidirectional meter. So I think that I won't go into the technical too much, but I think that at least you guys know what does NEM works. I think it's really good enough.
Right. Thanks, Eddy. I think that's very interesting because we always thought solar energy is, all day round, you have solar, it's the same. But in fact, it depends on the irradiation. And also a good point about changing meter. That's a small thing that we did not notice. You have to change it to bidirectional. Another interesting piece of information. All right, back to you, Rizal. So, as Eddy kind of illustrated just now, the policy is getting better for residents to adopt solar energy. So, as the head of business development and Bursa Carbon Exchange, how do you see a financial mechanism like voluntary carbon market and renewable energy certificates are playing a role in driving clean energy adoption?
All right, thanks, Shao. So I guess that's quite a long topic actually, but I will try to summarize it as best as I can in the interest of time. So there's two different products there. One is carbon credits, and the other one is renewable energy certificates. They are two distinct market-based instruments actually. So let me start with carbon credits first. So carbon credits actually generally channels funding from the private sector to the development of carbon projects. So carbon projects can be either a nature-based type of project, for example, reforestation, or it can be a technology-based type of project, for example, a biogas methane capture. So it can actually either avoid or remove CO2 from the atmosphere. And when you do that, to keep it simple, you can actually, of course, you have to go all through the different registration, validation process, and so on. But once you have done that, you have proven that you have actually avoided or removed the CO2. You will then be issued these certificates, and these certificates can be sold to corporates, mainly corporates and companies, for them to offset their emissions. So these certificates are actually evidence of the CO2 being avoided or removed. So why would you do that? So for corporates, mainly because when you try to decarbonize your own operations, for example, you may not be able to actually reduce all the way, despite you have done your energy efficiency initiatives, you have done your solar initiatives, electrification, fuel switching, and so on. But you will always have the balance of your emissions, the residual emissions. So although you can't do anything there, you can actually support or purchase carbon credits, and this is where you can offset your emissions, which is outside of your value chain. Now, carbon credits is actually very complicated, so I won't go into too much detail there, but RECs or RECs, renewable energy certificates, is a bit simpler. So RECs is basically evidence or proof of renewable energy generation. Of course, you need to go through all the registration, validation process, and so on. But as long as you are generating renewable energy, you can also generate the RECs together. So the electricity part is the actual electrons that you consume or that you generate. And the RECs are just the evidence or the attributes to prove that it is renewable energy. Now, this is important because, for example, when you, like Eddy mentioned, sell energy into the grid, they are not able to differentiate the types of renewable energy in the grid, because in there everything is electricity, everything is electron. So you don't know which one comes from renewable energy, which one comes from fossil fuels, and so on. So RECs are like the IC, so-called, to identify that this is a renewable energy that you purchase, and that's where you actually purchase it at a bit of a premium, because you'd like to get renewable energy from a grid that has a mix of both fossil fuels and also renewable energy. So basically, that's how it encourages actually more renewable energy generation, because as a renewable energy producer, you not only earn revenue from the sales of electricity, you can also earn additional revenue from the RECs. So most of the corporates who like to reduce further their Scope 2 emissions, now this goes to a bit technical, but it's only for your electricity consumption. You can actually purchase RECs to reduce your Scope 2 emissions. So these two attributes or these two products actually play quite a significant role in actually encouraging for carbon credits, encouraging more carbon projects, and for RECs, encouraging or incentivizing more renewable energy projects. Now, that being said, when it comes to the household, it's still or the end users, it's still not there yet because it's mostly being utilized by corporates. But as I mentioned, there's also new programs being mooted out by the ministry, by the Ministry of Energy, Petra. So that is a significant potential there to actually incentivize or to generate RECs from these kind of installations. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Rizal. That's a very comprehensive view on REC and also carbon credits. Understanding is a very complex topic that requires maybe like hours for you to explain. Just a quick question though. Like, so if I am a resident, can I also take advantage of these renewable energy certificates?
So the challenge here is that when you'd like to generate RECs, you first have to register your device. So for example, if it's a solar on your roof, you have to register that. Now the cost of registration, because the entity or the standard actually is it's not Malaysian, it's an international standard called IREC, and they are based in Europe. So the charges for registration is actually quite significant. I can't remember the exact value, but it's a few thousand euros. So if you have like a small system, for example, it's just a 4 kilowatt peak or something smaller, then it's probably not viable for you to actually go through all the registration process, the issuance process, which has a bit of cost. Unless you're a corporate consumer or prosumer, which you have a significant amount of solar, then it actually makes a bit more sense. Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Yes, they just the permit is just too expensive for household to kind of tap
generally.
into.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I think we're all clear that, solar energy is becoming increasingly accessible, especially for the residents. And with advancement and also some improvement in our policy, homeowners can now generate their own electricity, reducing their energy bills and contribute to a more sustainable future. So back to you, Eddy. I know that you talk about just now about meters, changes, and some of the technicalities on considering solar panel installation. Let us just dive deeper into the cost side of things. So, how much does it cost to install solar panel? Just now you mentioned like a ballpark figure. Maybe we can dive deeper into understand, the upfront cost, the maintenance, and also maybe we can have some basic assumptions on the capacity of that solar panel for household.
Okay, thank you, Shao. Okay, maybe we need to go a bit of electrical knowledge. So there's in electrical engineering, there's single phase and triple phase. So three phase or single phase, right? I think most of the houses nowadays are three phases lah. So we don't look at single phase. That is usually for the old houses. So three phases, okay, three phases. So NEM, the regulation says that you can install up to 12 kilowatt. 12 kilowatt is the power. So you cannot install more than 12 kilowatt. If you want to install more than 12 kilowatt, then you cannot qualify for the NEM. Okay, so 12 kilowatt, you can imagine maybe one panel is 0.5 kilowatt. So 12 kilowatt is 28 panels on your rooftop. So now the question is, what is the limitation of your rooftop? A lot of people stay in condo, right? So a lot of people stay in landed. Condo, maybe you can forget about it. You cannot install solar because the roof doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the JMB. And then for the houses, for the land houses, for those audience here who stay in land houses, when you go and approach the solar contractor, first of all, we will ask for your address, home address. Okay, like where do you stay? What is your electricity bill? Because we want to check how big is your roof. Okay, from Google Map, we try to see. If we cannot see, then we need to go to your house to see, or need to climb to the roof and see how big is the roof. So 28 panels, just now I mentioned 28 panels. One panel is like 2 meters square. So if you have 28 panels, you need a 60 meter square roof. In Malaysia, not many roof have 60 meters square. So normally what I saw in, let's say I take example PJ, Petaling Jaya, most of the roof is less than 10 kilowatt. Meaning to say I can put less than 20 panels on top of it. Some even put less than 10. It really depends on the houses and the roof that you have. And then we not only just look at the size of your roof, we also look at the type of your roof. Some of the roof, like metal deck, we can do a clip lock, like clip, so you don't have to penetrate into the roof. But some like tiles roof, you need to penetrate in. Meaning to say you need to screw in. When you screw in, we need to be very careful with the roof, because we really screw into your roof. So all this will decide the type of solar technology that we propose to you. But all these are technical, okay? All these are technical. At the end of the day, is the question is, what is the upfront cost, right? So if we take the example, we don't take big capacity, because that's usually very big houses. We just take an average. I think just now Rizal mentioned 4 kilowatt peak. So maybe we use that as an average for household who stay landed in Malaysia. 4 kilowatt peak solar, maybe 8 to 9 panels. It costs maybe less than 15K. Of course, this is not, I'm not quoting from Solarvest. I'm talking about general, less than 15K for 4 kilowatt. 4 kilowatt of solar on your roof, which is 9 or 8 panels. That is, you are able to save your energy, your bill by 200 ringgit or 250 ringgit a month. This is a rational, this is a example, okay, so that we can visualize. So if I save 250 ringgit a month from my bill, because I have the solar, 1 year I have saved 3,000 ringgit. Okay, 3,000 ringgit. So if my solar system cost me, let's say 15K at most, okay, so I need to have 5 years to get back to pay back my return, right? Because I pay 15K upfront. Every year I save 3K. So it took me 5 years to pay back. Solar panel can last for 25 years, some even to 30 years. It means that from year 6 onwards, you are actually benefiting, you're actually having the saving directly, which is 3,000 ringgit a year. It looks very small, but this small thing actually can be very useful when you talk about, because electricity tariff will increase in the future. Like it or not, TNB is not going to reduce your tariff in the next year or next 5-10 years. In fact, they have to increase, but because of the they have to consider many things, so they cannot increase the tariff so sudden. But I think recently, this year, July onwards, you would expect a 15% hike in the electricity tariff across the whole sector, across Malaysia, because TNB has just announced. So with that in mind, your 3,000 ringgit today is going to be more and more, put it that way. So that actually increase the financials and economics of your investment. So in general, I would say the upfront cost for 4 kilowatt, in summary, is 15K. Then normally the contractor will give you free maintenance for 3 years, for example. So you don't have to pay anything for maintenance for the first 3 years. Year 4 onwards, the maintenance that we talk about is also very minimum. We are talking about cleaning the roof, the panels. If you have, we need to configure your inverter from time to time, check the inverter performance. But all these are just less than a few hundred ringgit lah, I would say. So the most important criteria when you consider panel is still the upfront cost, which is the 15K. How you want to finance it? Are you able to pay by cash? You want to take credit card also can. Usually it's a 60 months credit card, 0 interest. Most of the bank now very gung-ho. They want to push for solar so they can offer you 0 interest. Or you can take a personal loan of up to 10 years. So you have 3 different options how you want to finance your rooftop. So I think I won't go too deep. If you are interested, I'm more than happy to share offline. Back to you, Shah.
All right. Thanks, Eddy. That's very interesting insights because we rarely have speaker talk about, the rooftop size, the panel size, and you have done all the math for the audience. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested to know more, the video actually will be recorded. So if you want to do your math, homework before you reach out to any of the service provider, feel free. But essentially what we're seeing is the payback period is around 6 years, 5 years. So is very viable and feasible. So something that's worth considering. And if you have further questions, feel free to send an email to sustainketer.marketing@gmail.com. Happy to link you up, connect you with Eddy. All right. There's one question though about battery storage, as we're all aware. So there's a limitation on the grid. So some people are considering perhaps installing battery storage. So from a resident point of view, what's your thoughts about battery storage? Is this something viable for residents to consider? Question to Eddy.
I think battery is a hot topic nowadays, but battery is not, I would say, not feasible for all the residential solar at the moment. Why? Because actually the grid itself is the battery, put it that way. Battery, the purpose of having battery is to store the excess solar. Mean to say when you're not at home, when the solar is still so bright, how can I store my energy, right? So that's why people think about battery. But the moment that you can export the excess solar back to the grid is your battery. And some more the grid is willing to pay you back 1-to-1. So in this regard, you don't have to get any battery, because battery is gonna cost you a double the capex. Like for example, if you pay 15K just now for the solar, if you put a battery which is compatible with the solar size, it will cost you another 15-20K. So no point to do that, because it's not gonna give you the returns that you require. As long as you have the NEM, you don't have to go for the battery. But of course, battery people start to talk about it now, because NEM has already started 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So they are in the midst of NEM is 10 years, meaning to say you sign 10 years of agreement with the TMB. After 10 years, you cannot have the NEM anymore. So that's where the battery comes in. So I think maybe 5 years down the road, you can thinking about putting the battery, but not now lah. Now maybe you can do some market research to understand how it works, but not the right time.
Right, thanks, Eddy. So moving on, we're going to move very quickly to energy efficiency. So understand that while installing solar, renewable energy system like solar panels is a significant step towards reducing emissions and potentially getting some savings out of it. But energy efficient practices can actually significantly reduce your energy consumption and reducing carbon footprint as well. So a question to Rizal, how can emerging technologies like maybe energy management system play a role in enhancing energy efficiency and reducing carbon footprint?
Yeah, thanks, Shao. Yeah, I guess energy efficiency is something interesting. Although it hasn't had the limelight as renewable energy or solar. Can't remember which organization said it, but energy efficiency, as I think it's IEA, National Energy Agency, that energy efficiency is actually known as the first fuel, because it's actually what everyone can actually do in the first place. Because there is also no point in having a lot of renewable energy generation if it is not used efficiently or correctly. So it is actually a low hanging fruit. It's just that it's not being, I guess, focused on enough. And when I was in the district cooling sector few years back, the idea of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act actually already came into play. I think that was 2016, 17, yeah, around that. And yeah, it's 10 years later, then only the act has come into fruition, just 1st January this year. But well, better late than never. But energy efficiency actually looks at how you utilize your equipment, your different machineries, and so on. So if you look at the household perspective, we can see that a lot of the older houses uses the older appliances and all the older equipment, and these are not actually very energy efficient. You can look at the star rating on certain appliances that shows how energy efficient it is. So as you purchase more efficient equipment, then you actually save a lot more in terms of your energy usage, and of course the cost of those energy. So I think, like for example, air conditioning nowadays you require inverter technology so that it's more efficient. And now people are even talking about smart homes, IoT technology. Everything can be connected to your app. and you can turn on and off even when you're not at home. You can program the timing and so on. So this actually helps with managing your energy from a household perspective. I don't think houses need an elaborate energy management system or EMS. That's maybe limited to buildings and so on. But that's something that we can actually embrace. Although the flip side of it is perhaps the cost to this. A lot of these newer technologies are a bit more costly compared to the older tech. But of course, the cost is also coming down. And if I recall correctly, SEDA is also providing some rebates for certain equipment. I think last time there was a SAFE program, and now just recently they launched the NOR program, NUR, where they provide rebate for, I think, just two types of equipment, air conditioning and also refrigerator, because these two are the in a household, these two are one those equipment that actually consumes a lot of energy. Um, just to share a bit, like last time, as I was mentioning, I was working in a district cooling plant. So that's something very interesting. It has been around for quite some time already. So if you are in, for example, the area of Putrajaya, Cyberjaya, even KLIA, KLCC, Bangsa, and also in the south, in Nusajaya, they have actually adopted this district cooling technology. So in short, how it works is that you have a centralized chiller plant which actually provides chilled water to the building surrounding it. So if you go to the offices in Putrajaya, they actually do not have their own air conditioning in their buildings, but they have it produced centrally from certain plants that provide this kind of energy. Although if we talk about households, this kind of technology is also a bit challenging to adopt. But in other advanced economies, they have actually tried these kind of technologies. So it's probably something that the authorities or the government can also explore in adopting this kind of technology a bit more. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Rizal. Looks like there's a lot of new technology coming up, and energy efficiency is definitely one of the low-hanging fruit that the audience can actually explore using more energy efficient equipment like AC, fridge, and perhaps exploring IoT system. If it's too expensive, perhaps can consider the ones from China or from Shopee, right?
Sure.
Okay, moving on. So in the interest of time, we'll quickly move on to the last theme. So it's more related to youth career and how youth can get involved. So we can see, there's a massive opportunities in the renewable energy space. So what do you see are some of the emerging career opportunities specifically in this field that young graduates can explore? Maybe first question I'll pose it to Eddy and then to Rizal.
Okay. I think in terms of, solar has been there for the last 10, 15 years, so it's not really a new industry. So for the young graduates here, for the young students here who wants to explore green technology career, you can always just directly refer to the NETR, the Energy Transition Roadmap. Why? Because over there, the government has already pinpointed what are the 6 economic levers for green energy moving forward for the country as we try to achieve net zero by 2050. So there's a few levers which are highlighted by the government. I think CCU is one of them, carbon captured. I think that's really a new segment. Not a lot of people are doing at the moment, but it's definitely something which is very promising in the coming 5-10 years. Now it's not booming yet because it's the cost is still high. So, but every technology start from there. Solar 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people say are too expensive, but now it's so cheap, even cheaper than gas or coal. So for CCU, it's a new technology. It is definitely going to come in Malaysia. Petronas is exploring it at the moment. A few other segments are like green mobility, the EV cars, the hydrogen cars. That definitely is one of the key topic or key drivers for Malaysia moving forward as we try to bring in more and more EV cars. There are other things like battery energy storage systems, not just for residential, but for the grid, for the commercial industrial buildings. We can also talk about like biogas, hydrogen energy. So all these are among the levers which are highlighted in the NATR. As long as it's in the NATR, I feel that there's a very promising career opportunities for all of us here.
Right. Thanks, Eddy. Look as a guidebook for you to explore potential career. Back to you, Rizal. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think in addition to what Eddy mentioned before, which is already very quite a lot of opportunities there, I think the other portion about the other angle to this is also ESG or sustainability. So this area is actually something that a lot of employers today are actually looking for. People with background in ESG or sustainability or with the experience, they're very sought after today, and it's even challenging for these companies to fill those positions. And actually, there's a lot of movement within the market, between companies, because there's a small pool of talent for this. So when we look at ESG, when we look at sustainability, there's actually a whole lot of different aspects of this. So that can include, for example, the accounting side, the reporting side, consulting, even project management, and analysis of data. There's a whole bunch of data for sustainability. If you understand scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, there's especially scope 3, there's a lot of data to be gathered and analyzed. So that's, I think, something that can be looked at, and there's also increasing number of courses for revolving around sustainability. And I also just learned that one important element about sustainability, at least in the reporting side of things, is that there's actually a strong relation between finance disclosures and also climate disclosures. So traditionally, people know companies like the Big Four, PwC, EY, and so on. They are very strong in terms of financial reporting and disclosures, but there's also a lot of relations to that, to climate disclosures. And mainly that's because most of the world, that's what they understand, financial impact. So to translate and actually converge the impact of sustainability into finance, now that's something that can actually, give an impact and actually move the needle in terms of sustainability. So that's something that fresh graduates, or people who are emerging now can actually explore. So thanks.
Right. Thanks, Eddy and Rizal, for the interesting insights. And there's great opportunity, massive opportunity for graduates. So keep exploring. All right. Thank you so much for the insightful sharing. So we'll now move on to the Q&A session. So we have seen quite a number of questions deposited in our Slido, and I'll start reading them. But for the rest of the audience, feel free to continue to deposit your questions. Perhaps as a start, I do see there's a question in the chat box as well, so I will start from there. Perhaps a question to Rizal, as you talk about fossil fuel just now. What would be the replenishing rate for fuel to be considered renewable?
Okay, I think that's a very good question. I don't have the answer for that. It's I guess you can look at the time horizon. So those technologies that I mentioned before, that you can actually derive from Big Show, bioenergy, geothermal, solar, hydro, ocean, and wind. They are practically replenished almost instantaneously. For example, solar, as the sun dips, like Eddy mentioned, after 7 p.m. we turn to night, and then we turn to day again, then it comes again actually. So it's a relatively short period of time, and I guess for most of the technologies or most of the fuels that I mentioned before, it's a very short cycle. So that I hope that answers the question. I don't know if Eddy has any thoughts on that as well.
Nothing much to add on that. I also don't have the numbers.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thanks a lot for the information. And the next one. So what is your thought on nuclear energy? And yeah, so the assumption is that it can be considered as renewable. Question to, I'll pose it to Eddy first, and then Rizal can chime in if you have any thoughts on this.
Okay. Nuclear, because it's still the minerals, right? Minerals of the earth. I still feel nuclear is renewable. I studied in France for 5 years. France is doing extremely well in nuclear energy. And the way they govern the nuclear energy is really safe. And and it's clean. For me, it's clean because it came from the mineral. There's no emission of carbon, some sort of carbon into the environment. So my own definition of renewable is as long as there's no emission of carbon dioxide during the generation of the fuel, I still consider it as renewables. So for me, I'm with nuclear. Just that I think Malaysia might not be suitable to do nuclear. This is my 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 take. Not all the countries are suitable to go for nuclear.
Okay, great. Next, maybe Rizal, what's your thoughts on nuclear?
Yeah, I think it's a good point because it is, one of those energy that is very clean in that sense. The problem only lies with the waste generated, and also like I think for Malaysia in particular, it's the maintenance mindset. To maintain a nuclear power plant in comparison to other types of power plants, you need a certain level of safety, a certain level of maintenance. So we can't skimp on even the smallest things. So as we have seen in a lot of the other nuclear disasters, of course, it's only a few of them. But we can see that the impact, one small impact, can actually contribute to a huge a large catastrophe in that sense. So the thing with nuclear is that the chance for it to for something to happen is quite high, a high degree of risk. So if we do not have the right mindset, we do not have the right skills, and also the right experience, then it's going to be very challenging. So of course, like Eddie mentioned, other countries have been using it for years. China has I know quite huge number of nuclear power plants, and they're still building a lot more nuclear power plants as well. So it is very challenging. A lot of studies need to be held, and I think the PR is very challenging to be had as well. So because everyone will say that, please, not in my backyard. It's called the NIMBY mentality, right? NIMBY. So where do you place this nuclear plant? No one wants it to be in their state or in their area. So, yeah, I guess that's a challenge.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Rizal and Eddie. Right, move on to the next question. So which area of renewable energy is hard to implement at the moment, and why people think RE or renewable energy is expensive? A question to Eddie.
Yes, I think I can take this one. I think RE, the biggest challenge of RE is the intermittency. So just now, although I mentioned RE is cheaper, as cheap as a gas and coal, but actually is I'm talking about the generation cost itself. But when it comes to stability of the grid, stability of the generation, you have to talk about the intermittency issue by renewables. Solar energy, like I said, it's a curve, you know. Sunlight just started at 7 a.m., peak at 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. After that, the sun irradiation drops to 5 p.m. All the grid system operators, TNB, Sarawak Energy, or any other countries, they don't like intermittency. We want to have stable energy supply to our households, etc. So if there's an intermittency of the grid, right, that it impacts the frequency and it really will destabilize the grid. So to counter that, we need to have stable supply of renewables from the solar. And to do that, you need to put in the battery. For example, solar is maybe 4 or 5 hours at peak in a day. So what happened in the remaining 19 to 20 hours? You need to have the battery to store the energy so that we can have constant supply of power from the solar farm. So if you put the battery into the picture, the whole economics become, I would say, very challenging because the whole the investment capital increased by more than double. So in that case, I would say yes, it's expensive when you look at the limitation of the renewable energy.
All right, thanks, Eddie. And continue with one more questions. Again, I think I'll pose it to Eddie as well. So can you explain the similarities and differences between REC and power purchase agreement?
Okay, power purchase agreement is a contract to sell electricity to another person. For example, if today, I just give you a scenario. If today I'm working in, let's say, Aeon, okay, I want to buy electricity from let's say a solar company. So the solar company will sign a PPA with me, power purchase agreement. Usually it's very long term, 20 years, so that the contract is bankable. So I'm buying electricity because I'm from Aeon, right? So I buy electricity from the solar investor in this case. REC is different. REC is actually the grid attributes attached to the electrons that you buy from the solar investors. Meaning to say, if I buy 1 kWh energy of electricity from you, if this is green, then I will have the REC attached to the electricity. So you can think of it like if today I'm generating solar, I'm not just giving power, I'm also generating green attributes, which is the REC. So it's these two instruments that are linked to one another. So I hope that explains or address the questions that uh, that that you have.
All right. Thanks, Eddy. And next question. So what are the key skills knowledge required for future sustainability practitioners? Question to Rizal, particularly in corporate.
All right. I think that's a quite broad answer to give, because there's so many different aspects, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of reporting, there's consulting, there's different areas when we look at sustainability. But I think what's more important is actually not just what skill to have, but it's actually the ability to be able to adapt and also adopt the different skills, because the world actually evolves, and also trends actually keep coming, and also evolving. So as exhibited by AI just last few weeks, suddenly someone can come in and just be a game changer. So that I believe is more necessary. The adaptability and the capability to be a bit more agile when things come. Of course, you have your own disciplines. It can be finance, it can be engineering, design, and so on. But to be able to absorb all the different knowledge and all different skills that comes along the way is very important. Now, this is quite easy to be done nowadays because there's a lot of different types of online courses, MOOCs, right? Massive open online courses by reputable institutions. You can get certificates from Harvard or MIT from the comfort of your own screen. What's important is actually how to apply what you have learned into what you are doing and keep learning. So I guess that's a more important skill to have. Yeah, hope that
All right.
answers.
Adaptability and lifelong learning. Thanks, Rizal. I think as we go through the questions and also answering the questions, perhaps the team can also pop in the feedback form. So for the rest of the audience, if you have the time, please feel free to fill out our feedback form. All right. Back to the questions here. So I think I'll pose a question to Rizal, and then Eddy, feel free to add. So what's the outcome of corporate when they explore renewable energy like solar? What's the benefit in the long term?
Yeah, I
First to
guess.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, Idra. My
Okay.
apologies, Rizal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I think for corporates, basically there's two different outcomes that they wish to look at. Number one, of course, is to reduce their costs. So Eddie mentioned, we all know that the tariff or electricity prices will definitely keep moving up as price of fuel keeps moving up as well. So number one is to, of course, reduce your expenses, reduce your costs in terms of purchasing electricity or energy. And number two, because nowadays there's also more importance focused on sustainability. So it's also important to reduce your emissions. So by installing solar energy, you can definitely reduce a lot of emissions because the grid still uses 80-90% fossil fuels. So I guess that's the two main points that corporates wish to see, and definitely it will benefit them in the long term because renewable energy like solar, like Eddie mentioned, it can last you easily 20 to 30 years, and it's quite modular. You can also add as you expand your operations or as you expand your load, as you add your load, you can also add more solar energy quite easily in that sense. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rizal. Eddy, anything you'd like to add?
Now, Rizal mentioned the second point, right, which is the corporate not only just want to save costs, energy costs, right, they also want to reduce the carbon emissions due to the net zero target or due to the regulation by the government. another aspect that we can look at is also driven by the trade economy or the trade situation between the West and Southeast Asia or Europe, because uh, whatever that corporate do is definitely they will prioritize the dollars and cents, the business. So if their customers are the one that push them to go for net zero, or the one that push them to redo the carbon accounting or carbon reporting, then the corporate sometimes have to go towards that direction, because their customers are the one that ask them to do so. For example, the CBAM policy in Europe, that is what pushing some of the MNC companies in Malaysia, because they are exporting products to Europe, and the products have to be green, or they have to really report the carbon emissions of their products. And to do that, they have no choice but to go for renewables. I think that for me is a very big driver that push the corporates to go for renewables.
Right. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Eddie. Right. Next one is on thoughts on waste to energy generation. I'll pose the question first to Rizal on your thoughts on waste to energy.
Yeah, so waste is an interesting topic for Malaysia, because we are not really there in terms of waste sorting, recycling, and so on. Although there's a lot of initiatives, but it's still not there. So we have actually amassed quite a huge amount of landfills in various areas. So waste to energy is actually deemed to be one of the potential in actually helping to reduce this landfill waste and actually generate energy from this. Although there's also a lot of challenges when it comes to waste to energy, because depending on the type of technology, it can also be a carbon negative, or it can be even polluting in terms of the incinerator and the type of technology used. I'm also not well versed in the different types, but um, so that's also a challenge. So the challenge is either you want to have your landfill being increased in terms of size and volume, or do you want to have technology there to be able to utilize the waste being generated there, or being dumped there, and convert it to energy. So that's always the conundrum to balance between managing the waste. Of course, ideally, to nip the bud from the source is to not even have that much waste, but that seems to be a challenge because it involves again the households. We do not have that waste management or recycling mentality. So that can actually help, as we can see in more developed countries, to reduce the waste. So until then, this is actually the option.
All right. Thanks, Rizal. I think in the interest of time, we actually will skip some of the questions. So if you are really keen to get the answer to these questions, feel free to send an email to us at sustainator.marketing@gmail.com. So before I wrap up, I'll just kind of call out one questions here. I think which is quite important. It's about collaboration. So question to Rizal and then to Eddy. How can all sectors work together to achieve net zero in the future?
Oh, that's also a very interesting and thought-provoking question. I guess everyone has their role to play for different sectors. So let's look at, for example, the oil and gas sector, because they've been demonized quite a lot, saying that they are one of the most polluting sectors. Just from all the activities in terms of mining of this energy utilization and so on. But we can't still today, turn off the taps from all these fossil fuels, because we are still reliant on it. Not everyone drives an EV car today. Not everyone can live without oil, diesel, and so on. But of course, we can actually find ways to reduce the emissions coming from that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to be practical, and we have to find ways. Of course, it's an urgent matter to find it. It's not just like giving up if there is no solution. There are always definitely ways, because we have, like in Malaysia, 30 million people, and there's so many different ideas that we can tap from and to implement. So every sector has its role to play in terms of finding how to reduce your emissions, And like I mentioned before, that's also where, for example, carbon markets come in, because when you are unable to actually reduce your emissions entirely, that's where you can rely on other parties to do it for you. For example, a reforestation area. So in Malaysia's context, the first carbon project ever was actually just launched last year, which is a reforestation project in Sabah, in Kuamuk area. It's a flagship project for Malaysia, and it's quite a successful project as well. So while we can't actually reduce the entire emissions of any sector, whether it's iron, steel, manufacturing, semiconductor, data centers, and so on, there is other avenues that we still can tap on while the technology actually matures. While carbon capture, utilization, and storage matures, while it's still expensive now, we can rely on market-based instruments such as the carbon market to help with the decarbonization, and the reliance on that will taper off once there is a more viable option to reduce emissions entirely or internally. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rizal. So, any thoughts on this, Eddy? How can all sectors work together from the point of view as a solar service provider?
I agree with Rizal. Actually, this is a very thought-provoking, tough question to answer, because this is actually, for me, is the hardest thing for a country to do that, because we have so many sectors, stakeholders. Everyone have their own different priorities, I would say. So I would take example from what the new government has done. I feel it very related to this question, where all the ministry need to work together to achieve the net zero target set by the country. The net zero target set by the country is not easy. It's not set by one ministry. So I think since the NETR is launched, right, you can see that so many ministries are involved. It's not just the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of now we have the Petra, new ministry, because for the transition. We also have CASA. Now, if you want to talk about biogas, you have to really work with Ministry of Plantation. If you want to talk about like waste to energy, you have to work with KPKT. So there are so many ministry involved, which for me is the same as all the sectors. So there's need to be a council, like what I think what the NETR council done is very good. They actually have this climate change council chaired by the Prime Minister. In this meeting, 5 or 6 ministries are in that meeting to talk about climate change. So it's not just one ministry who represent. So I think this kind of all-in-one approach is very important to align the stakeholders and to really align all the parties to work towards the same goal. So I think that's for me is very challenging, but yet the most important that we have to look into it.
All right. All right. I think that concludes our actually Q&A session. And I just want to thank you once again to Rizal and Eddy for sharing your insights, your expertise, and also your personal experience in this space. And big thanks to all the participants who joined us today as well. We hope you find this informative